Parents always tell us that pet ownership means responsibility, but Toru learns the hard way when he and his adorable new turtle must save the city from total annihilation. Welcome back to Recap Spot. Today we'll be going over the 2006 kaiju movie Gamera the Brave. In 1973, Kosuke Aizawa flees in terror as the village of Shima is attacked by winged Gyaos creatures. A giant turtle kaiju named Gamera appears to fend them off, but they quickly overpower him. As the villagers cease fleeing to watch the battle, Gamera harnesses his glowing energy and self-destructs, killing the creatures while sacrificing himself to save Shima. More than 30 years later, Kosuke returns to the site with his son Toru en route to visit the grave of Toru's mother, Miyuki. Kosuke tries to assure Toru that his mother is still watching over him, but Toru rejects the concept of an afterlife. As they leave Miyuki's grave and pass back through the site of Gamera's final battle, Toru sees a strange glow emanating from a distant island. They return to Kosuke's diner, where a news broadcast informs us that the giant creature committee is potentially being dissolved due to a lack of recent monster sightings. This is followed by an ominous story about missing seacraft. On a subsequent day, after playing on the beach with his friends Ishimaru and Katsuya, Toru hears Miyuki's voice at the diner and briefly hallucinates that she's still alive. However, he's shocked back to reality when a nearby patron knocks over his drink. Later, he speaks to his friend and neighbor Mai, who cheerfully loans him the newest Sergeant Frog manga. Downstairs, Kosuke confides in Mai's father, Osamu, that Toru doesn't get along with him the way he did with Miyuki. When he then asks Osamu how Mai is doing, it's hinted that there may be troubling news on the horizon. Toru later heads to the shore, and again sees a light in the distance. This time, he swims out to investigate. He finds a glowing red stone with an egg resting on top of it, which quickly hatches to reveal a baby tortoise. On closer inspection, Toru sees a strange pattern on its underside, resembling the one on Gamera's chest. Kosuke visits Osamu's pearl shop, where Osamu shows him a scarlet pearl that he's saving for Mai. Scarlet pearls, which appeared in Shima after Gamera's sacrifice, are apparently considered good luck. Osamu says that Mai will need it for an upcoming heart surgery. Toru examines the red stone in his room before playing with his new pet, which he decides to name Toto after a pet name Miyuki gave him when he was younger. In bed that night, Toru tells Toto that they can't have pets in the restaurant, so he'll have to keep a low profile. But when he wakes in the morning, he finds that Toto has more than doubled in size. Toru tries to hide Toto under a blanket when Kosuke comes in to clean his room, but Kosuke grabs the blanket to put in the wash. It nearly appears that Toto has disappeared, but Toru and Mai soon see him floating outside the window. After Kosuke leaves, Mai asks Toru what kind of creature Toto is supposed to be. Naturally, he tells her it's a turtle. Just you wait, kid. Realizing it might prove difficult to hide a flying reptile, Toru takes Toto to the beach to set him free. However, Toto is determined to earn his status as the cutest turtle in film history by stubbornly following Toru home. This almost leads to Toto getting run over by a truck, but Toru saves him at the last second and decides to keep him after all. Later, while Toru meets his friends at the skate park, Toto crawls out of a drawer where he's been hidden before bouncing his way down the stairs and into Kosuke's kitchen. He tries to float his way toward Kosuke's food, but he's accidentally swiped into Kosuke's wok and has to shred a sick frontside spin to get out. As he continues exploring the kitchen, Kosuke knocks a blade over in Toto's path, and Toto breathes a meager flame at it, leaving Kosuke confused when he finds the singed blade. After Toru and his friends finish skating, he invites them over to meet Toto, making them promise to keep Toto a secret. When Mai returns home, she seems unnerved to find Toto still there. Elsewhere, a bleeding man floats helplessly in the ocean. When empty life jackets float to the nearby surface, he tries to swim away, but something drags him underwater, leaving nothing but blood in his wake. Meanwhile, Counselor Hitotsugi announces that the Giant Creature Committee has officially disbanded. Mai later shows Toru an article on Gamera, and warns him that Toto will continue to grow. Toru doesn't believe her, but soon realizes his mistake when Toto grows to be nearly the same size as Toru himself. Toru and his friends smuggle Toto away under a blanket and sneak him to an empty hideout, where Toru stubbornly maintains that Toto's officially done growing, while Mei rightfully stares at him like an idiot. Toru and Mai later argue when he insists that Toto couldn't be the monster Gamera, but Mai states to Toru's confusion that she's simply worried she won't always be around to keep him safe. The next day, after sneaking out of the house to meet Toto, Toru overhears Mai arguing with her parents and learns about her surgery. As he later sits with Toto, he decides to give Mai the red stone. He returns her manga and offers her Toto's stone as a good luck charm. She promises to get better so that she can return it. While a search party finds the floating life jackets from earlier, Toru sits by the shore as Todo gazes into the sea with a worried expression. Mai, meanwhile, goes to the hospital to await her surgery, and the stone begins to glow. Toru returns to the hideout on a rainy day to find Todo missing, and he worries aloud to his friends that Todo doesn't love him anymore. That night, he dreams about Todo flying off and deserting him. As Toru later mopes around his hideout, he and Ishimaru hear sirens and run to investigate. They encounter Kosuke, who tells them an evacuation has been ordered. They flee together and soon run into Katsuya, but they're separated from him by falling debris, as the giant monster Zetas reveals himself. As Zetas feasts on frightened villagers, Kosuke and the boys see through a gap in the wreckage that Katsuya has survived. Kosuke rescues Katsuya and carries him to safety, and is almost attacked by Zetas when Todo intervenes. While larger than before, Todo is still much smaller than Zetas, who easily sends Todo crashing through the village. As Todo stands in heroic defiance, Toru stops fleeing and runs to help his pet. Counselor Hitotsugi is informed of Gamera's apparently reduced size, and decides to seek help from a specialist named Professor Amamiya. Meanwhile, Todo and Zetas take their fight to a bridge, where Zetas attacks Todo with his long, sharpened tongue. But Todo latches onto Zetas' tongue and breathes fire down his throat, temporarily winning the battle. Shortly after Todo collapses from exhaustion, the military arrives and takes him captive. As Mai lies in bed and contemplates the still glowing stone, the hospital staff arrives to bring her to surgery. Ishimaru soon informs Toru that Todo is being transported to the nearby city of Nagoya. Toru spots the transport and tries to run after his friend, but he can't keep up. Later, in an evacuation shelter, Kosuke asks Toru about his relationship with the creature he knows as Gamera. Todo is meanwhile taken to a holding facility, where Professor Amamiya reveals that the Scarlet Pearls contain the original Gamera's energy. He intends to use the pearls to accelerate Todo's growth. At the shelter, Kosuke tries to convince Toru that the turtle he loved is gone, but Toru refuses to believe him. Kosuke then receives a call from Harumi, who informs him that Mai's surgery was a success. Speaking to Toru, Harumi states that a half-woozy Mai keeps saying something about returning Todo's good luck charm. Toru and his friends decide to help Todo by retrieving the stone. They board a train to Nagoya, where Toru wonders if maybe Miyuki really is watching over him. As Kosuke finds a note from Toru informing him of the boy's plan, Amamiya reports that Todo's pearl injections have not affected his growth. Suddenly, Todo's eyes spring open, and an alarm sounds shortly before a revitalized Zetas breaks down the walls of the facility. As Toru and his friends run through Nagoya, they see on a news report that Zetas is on a rampage. Meanwhile, Kosuke speeds towards the endangered city in search of Toru, and Harumi scrambles to retrieve Mai from her hospital bed. Fortunately, the frightened creature committee bears witness as an enlarged Todo emerges from the rubble, ready for battle. Zetas continues his rampage, but Todo soon attacks. Toru and his friends spot the battle and fear that Todo is still too weak. They flee through an underground passage and reach the hospital, where Toru discovers Mai's Sergeant Frog book, but no stone. Kosuke catches up and slaps Toru for frightening him, but Toru laments that it might all be worthless anyway if the stone causes Todo to self-destruct like Gamera did. Nonetheless, after watching Todo fight a losing battle in the distance, Toru runs off to help. Kosuke follows, briefly stopping to give Ishimaru and Katsuya directions to the city shelter. Mai watches the battle from the shelter and unhooks her IV to go and deliver the stone herself. Her parents stop her, but an unnamed girl takes the stone from Mai and promises to bring it to Todo. As the little girl sprints through the city, Kosuke chases after Toru, but Toru says that Todo hasn't given up, and they shouldn't either. Meanwhile, a little boy stops mid-evacuation when he sees the girl struggling to get past the fleeing crowd. He takes the stone from her and continues the relay race to save the city, passing the stone to another child when he's halted by a police officer. The stone changes hands from one child to another until reaching a little girl in yellow, who nears the fight as Todo is knocked to the ground. Todo takes Zetas by the tail, but Zetas climbs a roof and flips Todo into a skyscraper. As Ishimaru and Katsuya get lost on the way to the shelter, they see the girl with the stone and chase after her. Zetas scales a building while Todo lies helpless, and Toru starts to run toward the fight when his friends arrive with the stone. This time, rather than try to stop him, Kosuke tells Toru they'll deliver the stone together. They enter the tower and rush up the stairs, but eventually find their passage blocked. Kosuke lifts the wreckage just enough for Toru to get through on his own. Toru reaches Todo and begs him not to self-destruct, because he can't suffer the grief of losing another loved one. Zetas then pounces on the tower and whips Todo with his tail, but Toru manages to toss the stone into his mouth as he falls. Just before hitting the ground, Toto regains his ability to fly. All the child stone carriers watch as Toto takes to the air and hurls himself into Zetus, knocking him from the skyscraper. Toto lands with a triumphant roar, but Zetus bites him in the shoulder and impales him with his tongue. As Toto begins to glow, the military warns Toru to flee, but Toru promises that Toto won't self-destruct. Instead, Toto rips Zetus' tongue out and then gathers his glowing energy into a massive fireball, which causes Zetus to explode. Exhausted, Toto collapses in the rubble. Hitotsugi orders the military to recapture him, but Toru and his friends block their way. As other children join them in the barricade, Toru orders Toto to fly to safety. They share one last mournful look, before Toto stands and launches into the air. As Mai quietly wonders if she'll ever see Toto again, Toru whispers a gentle goodbye, acknowledging his friend as Gamera for the very first time. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Click one of the videos on screen right now.